Well, you're in a special episode of the Smoke-Filled Room on location. We are here in the Palatine Township Republican Organization headquarters in, obviously, Palatine, Illinois. Our local host, Aaron Delmar, is the committeeman here, on top of being the committeeman or the chairman for Cook County as a whole. So I guess before we even launch into this, I should just say thanks, Aaron, for hosting us. Glad to be here with you and with your local Republicans from throughout Palatine Township.
Well, thanks for having us, man. So great to have you here. Finally have the Smoke-Filled Room here in Palatine. Thank you to all the crowd is here, fully packed room. Let's get ready to rock.
We'd love to hear from you all. Are you glad to be here this morning? We told them we'd give them free donuts if they clapped. So that's the only reason why you saw some applause. We also have with us, as always, we've got Chris from our political team who wasn't able to join us on last week's episode, so he's real happy to be here with us this week. Are you happy to be here and not have Michael so you could just sort of do your thing and he doesn't balance you out with his positivity?
You know, it's good to kind of, get away from that Southern Illinois mentality a little bit. Butler's got his ideas, but I'm glad to have my ideas out there in the open for, true suburbanites, true Northern Illinoisans. But I must say that this is the earliest I've been up for a political event since the consolidated election season. Why I'm up this early, eating coffee and donuts in a campaign office is beyond me, but I am a people pleaser. I love the people and the people love me back. So that's what I'm here to do.
See, and you're allowed to say anything in 2025.
That's
so
right.
Saying people love me, nowadays we can declare whatever we want. So
that's right.
Gotta love the current environment. We also have with us a new guest. We've got Gabriella Hoxie. I got it right?
Yes, Hoxie, yeah.
Really glad to have you with us. You're the communications analyst for the House Republican leader. Also the new vice chair of the North Cook County Young Republicans, which just launched to a lot of success. So thank you so much for being with us, too.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here with everybody. I'm also involved with Hanover Township Republicans as a precinct captain as well. So happy to be here and offer my perspective.
Well, let's talk about it. We got to start here. The state of Illinois was in session, steaming towards the end of May, when, of course, they decided to come to all of us, the taxpayers, to fill their budget gap. Republicans for years have been warning the public, hey, listen, and warning Pritzker and the Democrats, hey, listen, we're steaming towards a fiscal cliff in this state. You should do something about it. Of course, they didn't. Every year, they just plugged the gaps with tax increases and kept spending. Well, this year, here we go. The federal spending, the federal money has dried up, or at least started to dry up. And who did they go to? They went to the taxpayers to fill that gap while they kept continuing to spend. I'll start with Aaron on this one as our local host, but you've seen this over the years. You've been involved in politics a long time in the state. Isn't this just always what Springfield Democrats do?
Yeah, this is exactly right out of their playbook. They wait till the very last second. They bring out legislation for the next year's budget that is going to be thousands of pages. They bring the whole caucus of both Democrats and Republicans together. They give them about, a good 15, 20 minutes to read 6,000 pages of legislation. And they say, hey, it's time to call for a vote. Let's go burden the taxpayer here in Illinois with these oppressive taxes. We're not even going to give them a voice. We're not even going to let them know what's in the bill because nobody can read it in a short amount of time. And let's even make it more fun. Let's do it at about, 3 o'clock in the morning and see how that all works out. It's just typical, and it's really sad for our state. It's sad for all of us, the taxpayers, that are coming out of our hard-earned dollars that we've done over the years to make this bill happen.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Well, I think one of the most frustrating things from my perspective is the fact that, the Republican members, they're not involved in the process. So this entire budget is drafted behind closed doors. There's a lot of Democrats actually don't even know what's going on. It's a core group of a few that get to actually be involved. So then when it does come out, I think this year we had about 18 hours of review for about 5,000 pages. So how anyone can actually review that and analyze that, it's impossible. So then they're expecting us to vote on something that we're uninformed on. So we all have to vote no, because how can we vote yes on a budget that we don't know what in the world is even in it? This year we saw a lot of Democrats didn't know either when they were asked in committee, asked on the floor. There was a lot of, we'll get back to you on that, which is just code for I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's frustrating for us because we have to communicate with constituents about what's happening in Springfield and how do we communicate a budget when nobody knows what's in the budget, and that's intentional so that we don't know, we can't communicate it, and by the time we can, it's already passed and through the door. So super frustrating for us, and I think for everybody, for all the constituents, especially in Republican districts, you feel like you're not being represented.
Well, and that's how they hide the pork spending. That's how they hide the tax raises. I mean, it's always funny how weeks, even months after a budget is passed, suddenly we're like, hey, did you see this one thing in the budget? And everyone's like, are you kidding me? They wasted money on that? But of course, as you said, that's why they try to sneak it through at that last minute.
I think at some point it's going to have to give in the state of Illinois in terms of the budgeting process, because I don't think that you can maintain this system where you're going to wait until the literal 11th hour to even put out the budget, to have everybody read the thousands of pages in 15 minutes. I don't think this is sustainable long term, because eventually the fiscal health of this state is going to get to a point where you cannot justify doing things like this anymore. It's going to get to the point where there is actually going to have to be a significant restructuring of the budgeting process. It might not have been this year, because even though even Springfield commentators were saying that this was like kind of unique in how late they waited and how nothing else really happened this session except the budget. Even transit doesn't get passed, which we're going to talk about. But I think in the future, as the fiscal health of the state declines, you're going to reach a point where the current way that the Democrats try and do the budgeting process behind closed doors and try and shoehorn in all of their agenda items, it's not going to work anymore, because it's not the fiscal health of the state isn't going to be it's not going to be healthy enough to where you can do this anymore.
I respectfully disagree, because I think that as long as we are in the super minority in the House, until we can get veto-proof, get rid of the veto-proof Democratic control of the party, they're going to do this, and they're going to continue to do it. And the fiscal cliff has been this way for decades. But what they keep on doing is they keep on raising the taxes. They keep on raising the taxes, regulation, and they say, you know what, this is a one-time tax that we're going to do for 1 year only, to raise the revenue that we need. And they do it every year. They just renew the legislation. So until we as Republicans can get together and we can find a way to start getting more of our House of Representative candidates elected, and we can start breaking that supermajority, and we are now a part of the conversation. Because like she said, we're not even in the room when they're starting to make these decisions. We have to find a way that we can have an integral part, and we need to get back to a two-party system, because right now we don't have that.
Well, some of the things, if you look at what's in this budget, let's talk about some of the most egregious things, because part of our goal is to equip you all with what should you be talking about. So, number one, you got to talk about the fact that this is a record high spending budget. When J.B. Pritzker took office, we were spending $39 billion in this state. This budget was $55.2 billion. As a matter of fact, when you look at the chart and you see what our spending was, I got a gentleman holding it up. You look at the chart, and I know Lane brought it up on screen during our last episode. You see in the years preceding Pritzker, it's fairly even. There's slight increases over time. Pritzker takes office, and it just shoots through the roof. Their excuse was COVID, but COVID's over, and they're still spending. They're still raising our taxes. And so the first thing you talk about is this is record spending in the state of Illinois. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that before we go to the next one.
It's been actually a 38% increase in spending since Pritzker's first year to where we are right now. And he's only been in here at 1 term and a half, so about 6 years we're looking at. And 38% increase is astronomical.
A couple of things, too, that now you're starting to see. One of them is the tax that they passed last cycle that is now being implemented since January, and it's a tax on all rentals. Yeah. So if you go to Home Depot and rent a carpet cleaner, it's now 10% more expensive. If you go and rent a car, it's now 10% more expensive. Those are things that now people are starting to feel, along with all the groceries and everything else being more expensive. They were starting to see all those rentals. You want to rent chairs, you're having a wedding, it is now 10% more expensive. We did have a little bit, we did duck a bullet this cycle because they weren't able to get the service tax through, which would have been horrible for everyone. If you go get a haircut and it's normally $20, now it's going to be $22.50. We did duck that, but I'm willing to bet you that's coming down right around the corner, and we should definitely be vigilant about it and keep an eye, because that tax is going to affect everybody at every different level.
I love your man of the people over here trying to pretend he only spent $20 on his haircuts. Come on.
Well, it's a lot easier. It's a little bit of a gray. I don't darken it up anymore. No more shoe shine on the sides.
Another thing you've got to talk about in this, this is just a month ago or so, Chris Welch, the Democratic Speaker of the House, admitted that his caucus is a bunch of tax and spend Democrats. He literally used that phrase, which every political pundit, even on the left, was like, okay, that was a big mistake, buddy. You shouldn't have said that. But they're now even admitting that they are tax and spend Democrats, which is something you should talk about. The other thing to talk about is the tax hikes. In this last budget, they always look for what's the least politically painful tax hikes that we can pass. So which taxes did they hike? They, of course, hiked taxes on businesses, because they do that every time. Aaron mentioned short-term rentals. They hiked the wireless tax, which, by the way, it's a small thing in your monthly budget, but the wireless tax in Illinois was already the highest in the whole country, and they hiked it even further. You talk about what's going to hurt your lowest income people the most. That ended up where these Democrats went. They always like to say they're for the low income, for the working families, but they hiked taxes on nicotine, on your wireless. What do you guys got here? They hiked it on Zyn. Here we go. Come on. Yeah.
Now it's like $9. Like, this is crazy.
Among the highest in the country, our taxes on cigarettes are the highest in the country already. And who's that hitting? Other than these two, that's hitting your lowest income demographic. Like, you don't see high income people. We've got the committeeman from Barrington Township here. You don't see a lot of people walking around with cigarettes in downtown Barrington. Like, who's this hitting? This is hitting your working families the most, and yet Democrats try to claim they're the party of the working families. You've got to fight back on that.
Well, what they figured out is there's not enough high earners that are out there. These super millionaires and billionaires that Democrats have been talking about taxing, they've all left the state of Illinois. They've gone to Florida. They've gone to Arizona. They've gone to Tennessee. They've gone to Texas. So there's not enough billionaires to tax, so who do you have to tax? They have to tax everybody else. There are a lot more low-income people, more middle-income people in the state of Illinois, so if they can get a few dollars from us every single day to fill that budget hole, it's a lot easier than trying to go after the Ken Griffins who have already departed Illinois for Florida.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Aaron, I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here.
No, get out of town.
No, yeah. In 2020, they tried passing the graduate income tax amendment, which would have allowed them to raise the taxes on the highest income earners. That failed thanks to the work of people like Collin, Corbett, and a bunch of other people in the state of Illinois. Not me, of course, but other people who are smarter than me, I suppose.
So all other people.
Got it.
But my point is that when you don't have when you have a tax system in the state of Illinois, which is a flat tax, you cannot raise the income on the highest earners more than it is on the lowest or the middle income earners. This is something that you have to do if you want to raise revenue. So I'm not saying this is a good thing. But what I'm saying is that with the Democrats not having the ability to just automatically raise the rates on the highest income earners, they have to look to the lowest income earners with these sales taxes on Zins, on cigarettes, on the wireless tax, and everything else.
Gambling also is another one that just got whacked.
Sports wagering, yeah. So, but then don't claim you're for the working families. I mean, listen, former state senator for this area, and I think board member of your organization, Tom Rooney, he went down to Springfield when he was serving, and he said, you know what, you all want a graduated income tax in this state? There actually is a way they could do it legally without a constitutional change. If they were to lower taxes, they wouldn't need constitutional permission to do so. And so if next time you hear a Democrat say, well, we just want to tax the rich and you all didn't give us the graduated income tax like Chris just did, you can return and say, you know what, if you really wanted a graduated tax structure, you could do it right now and lower taxes on working families and on the lowest income. They always like to push that lie, so I always want to put that out there. People don't realize, Tom Rooney made us all aware, we didn't know, that you know what, if you want a graduated system in Illinois, if you really do care about those low-income people, you could lower their taxes right now. But of course, Democrats don't do it. A couple other things to look at in this budget. We got to talk about it. They hiked their own pay. Politicians hiked their own pay for the 7th time in the last 7 years. They're doing such a great job that, you know what, while you have to pay more taxes, they get to take home more money. I mean, I don't know how many of you have gotten raises 7 times in 7 years. Chris works for me. He sure as heck hasn't. So, I mean, but this is...
I have.
Yeah.
I work for myself. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what these politicians do, right? Over and over. It's like, hey, pat ourselves in the back. We have a balanced budget, so we get a pay hike.
Yeah, well, it's actually not balanced if you have to raise the revenue to meet the spending. It's balanced if you see your revenue and then you meet that with the spending. So they say balanced, but it's not balanced.
And they did fund sweeps. So they yanked money out of the road fund. They yanked hundreds of millions of dollars out of other funds in order to balance this budget. So they've borrowed on the future. We're going to pay those bills next year and the year after and the year after.
Yeah, they have a really loose definition of what balanced means. It kind of means whatever they want it to mean. And yeah, we saw that with the road fund, rainy day fund, a lot of moving things around, a lot of gimmicks to try to kind of get through. But it's for, everybody else, when you're balancing your budget book, you don't say I have a balanced budget and then, increase your spending and then try to match that by making more money. That's not how anybody does it. That's not how working families balance their budget books. They see how much they make and then they meet that with their spending. So to get a raise for doing that over and over is, it's kind of crazy to think about that in private industry. None of them would be getting a raise for doing what they're doing in Springfield. You kind of are supposed to do a good job and then potentially get a raise. So I think it'd be fun if, maybe the voters could decide if they get a raise every year. I think that would be a great idea.
There you go.
Well, if they were in private industry, half of them would be eliminated because when you have too much spending, what's the first thing that goes? You start firing people because that's usually the most expensive part.
Well, and another thing that was in this budget is they tried to cover it over and say, oh no, we eliminated it, but still in this budget is funding for free health care for non-citizens. Still in this budget. They're still spending, I think, $200 million this year on it. So yes, they have cut some people off of it, but still, Democrats are saying, even though you can't get the help that you need as citizens of this country and this state, we're going to still give free health care to non-citizens. And I know the Republicans down in Springfield have been calling this out for a couple years now.
So, CJ, you're safe for one more year.
Well, that's enough on the budget. Let's keep moving on. Chris mentioned we're going to talk transit. We got to talk transit. So, as you guys I'm sure have heard over and over, the Chicagoland transit systems are hitting this fiscal cliff because the federal money is drying up, and suddenly it's going to explode or implode, and we're going to lose all sorts of our service. What you got to know about this before we even get into the details is, yes, Metra and Pace are facing some problems that they need assistance with. They do have some budget gaps, but where the real problem here is the CTA. All this is about the fact that Brandon Johnson's CTA is massively in the hole, massively in debt. And so this whole reform, the transit systems, is all about bailing out the CTA. They are billions of dollars in debt. So as you hear this talked about more and more, they failed to get it passed in Springfield, and we'll talk about that. But you're going to hear about that all through the summer. You're going to read about it in the news, watch it on social media. This will keep being talked about. And just be aware that the whole reason why this is needed to be done, yes, RTA, Metra, Pace need a little bit of help. This is all to bail out Brandon Johnson's CTA.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues here is that what they're trying to do, and the reason they didn't pass this cycle, is because it's a redistribution of tax dollars from suburban areas all the way back to the city of Chicago. Even if you have Deb Conroy, who was the Democratic chair of DuPage, adamantly against this because they were going to take DuPage tax dollars and redistribute to the CTA in order to do it. This is a transit bill that is going to have an effect on everybody. Even my kids that want to go to a Cubs game, that jump on the Metra and they head on down to go get off over by Wrigley Field. This is going to affect every way people get to work every morning when they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they go on the CTA bus to get to school or get to work, or people that are mass transit coming from Palatine or Arlington Heights to reverse commute. This is going to have a real integral effect because if they can't get the budget spending correct, they are then going to start having to do less and less services. So instead of being able to get a train or a bus every hour, you're going to be waiting an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's going to, and then the ones that do go every hour and a half to 2 hours are going to be super packed. So this is a bill that really needs to get looked at. It's something that is going to be important because it affects everyday lives for people all around Illinois.
Yeah, let's talk about the governance structure. So I won't get too much in the weeds, but right now the way the RTA works and some of these other transit agencies work is you've got 15 board members, 5 of which are from the collar counties. And there are requirements that you have to get a certain threshold of the vote anytime they want to do anything that requires suburban voices to be heard. This new transit system, the reforms that you're hearing about, they're adding 5 more board members to dilute the power of the collar counties, and they're eliminating some of those requirements that collar county voices have to be heard on specific votes. In this reform, when you hear that word reform, it's all about giving more power to J.B. Pritzker, because now he gets to appoint the chair, he gets to appoint 5 members. It's giving more power to Tony Preckwinkle. We're here in Cook County. People don't realize that even though Cook County currently puts 5 people on that board, Tony Preckwinkle only does 1. The actual commissioners do the other 4, and it's required to be from certain segments of Cook County. Under this reform proposal, Preckwinkle gets to do all 5. She gets to put whoever the heck she wants in there. It gives more power to Brandon Johnson, as we talked about. So the governance structure, on top of the finances and everything else that we need to talk about, this is sucking control of the transit system down to Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker. And so if you live in suburban Cook County or in the collars, Metra, Pace are all going to be controlled by Chicago, no longer by your local leaders.
Typically I would be in favor of milking DuPage County's tax dollars to pay for anything going on in Cook County. However, this time, not so much, because it's not just DuPage County that's being affected, it's the entire suburbs. But I do want to say this. There's a lot of blame on the state legislature right now for not passing reasonable transit reform and funding in the state of Illinois. And it's justified. Everything Collin says is accurate. They're transferring power to the governor's office. They're transferring power to the chairman and the president of the Cook County board. All of that stuff's bad. However, from a financial standpoint, I do not blame the state itself. There is blame for the state, but this is the CTA's problem. The CTA dug itself into this unfixable hole. And I don't think any Illinois state legislature, be it controlled by Republicans, be it controlled by Democrats, will be able to come up with a popular solution to the transit problem. I don't think there is an easy solution. I don't think anybody has all the right answers when it comes to transit reform. But what I will say is that it's interesting that we were in that we are in such a dire state when it comes to transit, and it doesn't seem like that was the main priority of Springfield because they were not able to get anything accomplished. Even if it was something unpopular. Even if it was something that was unpopular that the voters were not going to like, if they were able to pass that, I honestly would have respected it more than kind of leaving us on this cliffhanger where the Senate votes on it for some reason and then the House does nothing with it and we're kind of in this limbo. That's what the problem is here. It seems like
total lack of leadership and spineless.
Yeah, exactly. And because everybody's focused on like a budget that's going nowhere and everyone's trying to scotch tape that together, we can't if we actually had like a reasonable budgeting process in this state, I think that the transit reform would have been a lot easier. I don't think it would have, like, again, nothing that Springfield passes is going to fix this. It might make things worse. But the problem is that there's not any leadership and there's a lack of priorities in the state of Illinois. That's what I think.
Well, it's because we have the governor that's not trying to be the governor of Illinois. He's trying to use Illinois as a petri dish to see what kind of far-left policies will work over here. So when he runs for president in the next cycle, he can say, hey, look, this is what we did in Illinois. Even though that is not what's right for Illinois, he's not thinking about people in this room. He's not thinking about people in Illinois. He's trying to say, what is going to get somebody in California to vote for me? What's going to get somebody in New Jersey and New York to vote for me? And that's the absolute wrong direction that we need to be going in Illinois.
Absolutely. And I also want to add, too, for people that don't know how it necessarily works in Springfield, the Democrats come up with a legislative calendar from January to May 31st. May 31st, the budget is supposed to be passed because the kind of amount of votes needed changes after May 31st. So they create this schedule and they introduce this transit bill in the last week of session. So they know what's coming. They know it's the end, but this is bad governance. They're introducing a transit bill, the budget, an energy-related bill that's really important, and they're introducing it in the last week. And then they're like, well, why is this not passing? You had all session to create a good bill where you could get people on board. And then we're at the end and it doesn't pass. Well, that's bad governance. That's what happens when you have people that don't know how to leading something. They can't get it through.
Well, we need to talk about the revenue portions of this, the revenue enhancements, Democrats like to say, because you got to pay for this somehow. And the structural reforms are awful, but even worse than that is how they were planning on funding this. Let's talk about some of the things that they were pushing forward that would hit you all, the taxpayers, in order to fund this CTA bailout. They were talking about a delivery tax. Every single delivery to your house was going to get a $1.50 tax. That means not just food deliveries, that's grocery deliveries, that's medicine deliveries, that's Amazon deliveries, Walmart, wherever you're getting your deliveries from. Every single time someone came to your doorstep with something, there'd be a $1.50 tax going towards this to pay for that. They talked about expanding services, tax on services, the sales tax on services, like Aaron said. They talked about increasing tolls, because we all love the tolls we pay around here. They talked about a rideshare tax. They also talked about what's called a real estate transfer tax, which if we talk about how difficult it is to raise our home values, because I don't know if you know this, but the home values in our region have risen the slowest in the country in the past decade. What's keeping that down? It's property taxes, it's everything else. Well, you add a real estate transfer tax on top of that, where when you sell your home, you've got to pay $2,000, $3,000 in a tax just because you sold your home. Those are the kind of things they're looking at in order to fund this CTA bailout. No suburban taxpayer, let alone statewide taxpayer, is open to that kind of a crazy level of investment to fund a transit system that they mostly don't even use.
You know, that's one of the things that you talked about in the real estate transfer tax. Everybody thinks, well, whatever. If you have, if you're a rich guy and you have a bunch of real estate, you should be able to pay your fair share. What they're not understanding is that you have people that are on the southwest side of Chicago, people that are, a person that came to the United States in the late 80s, bought a 6-flat, lives in one of the 6-flat units, and rents the other ones out. That is their total retirement plan. Right? They've lived in that house for 30 years to pay up that mortgage, so when they move or whenever they do on the next step of the retirement life, that's their little nest egg. And now you're going to punish these people for taxing that. That's the same thing you had when we were talking about some of the other taxes they're pushing through. These are the taxes that are hitting everyone. When you have a business and you want to sell your business, your storefront, your nail shop, whatever that tax may be, and you sell the building with it, you're being punished again. See, that's what the problem was in Illinois. We're not developing our tax base by building businesses up. We're beating our businesses down. And when people are looking and saying, like my kids, my son's just graduated from college. Do we want to move back to Palatine or in Illinois? I want to start a business, Dad. Go to Florida. Go to Tennessee. Go to Arizona. that business will never even start in Illinois. It's going to go to another state.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to touch back quickly on the 150 delivery tax, because I think that was a lot of people didn't like that, but I want to talk on who that really affects, which is, again, low income, middle income people with disabilities, the senior population, because who is using grocery delivery and who is using, Amazon the most? People that can't necessarily always leave their house. And now we're going to be putting a senior tax on, a disability tax on these people that they can't afford this. I mean, it's already expensive to be getting these deliveries, and now we're even increasing it even more. And then on top of that, you're asking people in Dixon and Carbondale and Springfield to pay for a transit system that they will never use is ridiculous. I mean, you're already putting a bigger tax burden here in the suburbs. I'm in suburban Cook County, and we're already getting taxed for things that we never use in the city. And now you want everybody to be in the state paying for stuff that they never use in the city. It's so unfair. It's really disappointing. And I'm glad that part didn't pass. But of course, nothing's ever dead in Springfield. So we'll see if it comes back.
And she hit it right in the head. This was the opening caveat, right? They're going to say, hey, and they're going to hit us with shock and awe. And they're going to get everybody all rustled up. And they're like, you know what? We decided we're not going to do it. But wait till next cycle. That's when they're going to reintroduce it. And everyone won't be at that outrage because they're like, oh, we heard about that last year. And then they'll be able to sneak it.
We don't have time. Unfortunately, Aaron, we don't have time to introduce it again next cycle or next session. They're already, there's, whispers, hush, hush, that they might be coming back pretty soon to try and figure this out.
Veto session,
yeah, or even maybe before that. I don't know. But they have to figure this out sooner rather than later, or you're going to be approaching a scenario where, maybe you guys don't use the CTA. I don't use the CTA that much, but I do use the CTA. And there's already the doom grifters. The doom grifters on Twitter.
Spelunkers of misery.
That's me, Collin. I'm a spelunker of misery. But the doom grifters on Twitter are already designing, because this is what young people on the north side have nothing better to do with because they don't have jobs. But they post these maps. It's this is what the CTA is going to look like, if we don't pass the transit bill. And it's always funny. It's they keep all the north side lines. They keep the red line. They keep the brown line. They keep the north end of the blue line. But you know what goes? The pink line, the orange line, the south end of the green line. But they always got to keep the red line expansion, 130th Street. Yeah. We're talking $5.5 billion to go to 130th Street on the red line. And now we're wondering why the CTA is broke. What's going on here, folks? But in any case, I just want to kind of, with that point, I also want to end with this. It's interesting in line with transit, in line with the budget. I have been talking ever since I started being on the record with this politics stuff because my boss tells me to. I've been talking about Madigan revisionism or Madigan nostalgism, that sort of thing. And it's interesting that we have Republican members of the state house, I believe it was C.D. Davidsmeyer, who said that he missed Mike Madigan because things actually ran better with Mike Madigan. Now that might sound like a bold idea to a lot of Republicans in this state, but I guarantee you ask any Republican, Freedom Caucus, Eastern Bloc, moderate, who cares? They will tell you things were better under Madigan because Madigan, for what it was worth, he kept these idiots in line, okay? You might not like the things that Madigan did, but the thing is he got them done. J.B. Pritzker was a boring liberal Democrat governor from the Midwest before Mike Madigan went down. He was he was the governor of Illinois. It's kind of a name, but he was just, who cares here before Mike Madigan went down. Now that it's Chris Welch in there, and Welch doesn't really know what he's doing, J.B. Pritzker has free reign over the state, and right now, he doesn't care about the state, so you end up with these scenarios where, hey, we have a fiscal cliff in transit not being addressed. Pritzker's nowhere to be found. He's probably off in New Hampshire. He's probably off in Iowa. Who knows what he's about? And you have the budget, which again, he gives the state of the state. This is what I want to do, guys. I'm going to go leave the state now. You guys figure this out. Oh, what do you mean none of my agenda items got passed? That's what we're dealing with in this state now. The adults have left the room.
Well, and one thing, if you isn't clear, just so you all know, on Friday, if everything stays according to schedule, Mike Madigan's going to be sentenced for his crimes. And the only person who will be sad, other than Madigan and his family, is Chris over here when Madigan goes to prison.
See, listen, it's not about Madigan and the crimes that he's been convicted of. I'm simply...
No, we get you. We get you.
Right, and Madigan's going to have 12 years to think about everything that he did for the last 40 years as behind bars.
One last thing on transit, just because this is so Democrats, this is so Springfield, I got to make sure you're aware of this. There's a little paragraph snuck into this transit bill. When it comes to this delivery tax, that will not allow those delivery companies to let you know why you're paying $1.50 extra. It's a little thing they stuck in there where Amazon or your local grocery store, they can't tell you that you're paying an extra $1.50 because the state of Illinois raised your taxes. It's in this bill that they can't even tell you that you're paying extra because of the state of Illinois, because of politicians. This is what they do. Whether it's the gas tax, or we saw it here with the candy tax in Cook County. I know Sean Morrison tweeted about this.
Tax,
so
that's
frustrating.
right.
Yeah, the soda tax. How frustrating it is that these politicians raise taxes and then they don't want you to know about it. That's how spineless they are. All right, let's go to our next topic here. Let's talk about Democrats and just how much they keep raising the cost of living for working families in this state. Because if you're out talking to voters, that has to be what you are talking about. Whether you're a candidate, a committee person, whoever you might be, you need to be talking about the cost of living. That is the number one issue with voters. I own a polling company. We test this every month. It is cost of living, especially on working families. And if you look at what Democrats have done in this state, even though they claim in all their TV ads, they claim how responsible they are, how they've helped working families. I'm going to, in 30 seconds, let's see if I can do this. I talk pretty fast. In 30 seconds, I want to give you a sampling of the different taxes or increased costs that Democrats either accomplished or tried to accomplish just this year. So your energy rates are about to spike the energy cost by 50% over the summer. So when you get your next electric bill, you're going to see a $30 to $40 to $50 increase thanks to Democrats in this state. You see we're paying twice as much for gas compared to last year in areas of Chicago. Senate Democrats tried to add a mileage tax on top of our gas taxes. Multiple Democrats tried to allow counties and municipalities to impose their own gas taxes. They tried to extend the sales tax to all services. They've worked to increase health insurance rates with multiple bills that they passed that will raise your health insurance costs the next time you get your renewal. They pushed to increase energy costs with multiple bills. Here we go. They pushed to increase your auto insurance rates. They increased car rental prices. What's the end result? We now top 3 different rankings in the country as having the highest property taxes. We now pay the highest combined state and local taxes in the country. We have fewer private sector jobs today than we did in 2019. Your home value growth has been the worst in the nation over the last decade. Even your home insurance premiums jumped 50% in the last couple years. That's what Democrats have done in Illinois to working families.
And I think it's key to talk about this, Collin, and we've talked about it a little bit earlier, and I want to refresh everyone's memory. The reason we can put all of this on the Democrats is because they're not even letting the Republicans in the room for the discussion. They have a supermajority in the House, a supermajority in the Senate, and they have the governor's mansion. And that lets them veto-proof majorities. The Republicans are sitting in the corner, not invited to the meetings, not a part of the discussion, just sitting there not doing anything except screaming and yelling and trying to highlight it. That's really the best that they can do is shine lights on all these different taxes and all these bad policies and horrible governance. But that should be the call to action for all of us in Illinois to, one, we need to show J.B. Pritzker the door in the next cycle, and two, we need to get out of the veto-proof minorities in both the House and the Senate. And that will make an impact on Illinois because now we have to be a part of the conversation.
Well, and you're going to get a sneak preview of what Chris and I and Michael are going to talk about next week on the podcast. One of the things we're going to talk about is national polling. Even CNN in their polls, when they ask which party do you trust most for working families, and which party is the party of the middle class and of working families, 20, 30 years ago, it was Democrats by far. But under Donald Trump, the Republican Party has been changed to be the party of working families, and now even the voters respect that. Again, it used to be, I think, plus 38 for Democrats or plus 30 for Democrats in this category just a couple decades ago. Today, it's tied. We are seeing a massive shift where the Republican Party is no longer the party of the North Shore liberal, fiscal conservative, the penny loafer wearing, what do they call that, the country club Republican. Now we're the party of the working class. We're the party of working families. And so when Democrats are doing this, where they're raising costs for working families, you've got to point that out to your neighbors.
Absolutely. And stop letting Democrats control the narrative in this state. Every Democrat that goes out and campaigns says that they're working on lowering costs for working families. And you say, okay, so you've had the governor's mansion in both chambers for decades. What have you done for working families? They've been controlling the narrative. It's time for us to take that back, whether that's at the doors, whether that's at community events, to get out there and say, well, that's not accurate. You're not doing, if you could do anything you wanted as a Democrat in the state, you could do anything you wanted, and you're choosing not to. So I think that's important that we're explaining that to voters as well.
Yeah, we just polled this recently. Our next tracking poll goes in the field, I think, like next week or something. But the last time we tested this, we asked Illinoisans, do you think it's affordable to live in this state? Only 20%. In a blue state, only 20% said they thought it was affordable to live in Illinois. And this hit every demographic. Sure, conservatives, Republicans, et cetera. Of course, we all said it wasn't affordable. But who else said it wasn't affordable? Democrats by a 21% majority. Liberals by a 28% majority. Hispanics by a 51% majority all said, no, it's completely unaffordable to live in this state. And by the way, most of them said we want to get the heck out of town. When even Democrats and liberals admit that they can't afford to live here, that's a problem. That's what we're going to keep pointing out. Let's go to the next topic here. Oh, go ahead. What's part of the problem here? Well, Aaron already said it. As a business owner, I'm a business owner. Who in the room is a business owner, a small business owner? Thank you all, because Illinois hates you, so thank you for what you do. The reality in Illinois is that unless you're pals with J.B. Pritzker, you don't get any help from Illinois. As a matter of fact, you get the opposite of help. If you're tied to Pritzker's political operation or he thinks you can donate, he'll give you a big handout, do a big press release. You get millions of dollars from the state of Illinois and our taxpayers. But for the rest of us, the business environment in Illinois is among the worst, if not the worst, in the entire country. And this is a problem for the future. Aaron already said it. I mean, his kid's saying, hey, why would I come back to Illinois? My little boy Teddy's just a year old, but I think about that future 17 years from now, 18, 19 years from now, when he's like, yeah, Dad, why would I come back? Like, this is a huge deal here, because when your businesses aren't thriving, they're not creating jobs, your employees aren't making good money, and now 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the state of Illinois is an even worse budget crunch than it is today. This is a problem, and we don't help our businesses in this state.
No, and 100%, for all the people that raised your hand when Collin asked you about being a small business person or a large business person, I want to thank you for still being here. And
a
especially
large
being in the
business person.
You know why? Because here's the deal. Because you have done something that most people can't do. You've built and kept your business alive in Illinois. Not because of Illinois, but in spite of Illinois, in spite of the taxes, in spite of the regulations, in spite of all the hardships that you have. To still be here and to still be operating is a huge success for each and every person that raised their hand.
Yeah, we see rankings all the time of where Illinois ranks, and it's always down at the bottom. And why is it? I just want to point to one bill, because if there's any bill that could prove to you just how clueless Springfield Democrats are, this is the bill. They tried to pass a bill that would make it so that your employees didn't have to work if it was 80 degrees out, because that's too warm to work for them. Literally, it was, if it was too cold or too warm, your employees could just say, I'm not showing up to work, and you weren't allowed to do anything about it. That's how clueless these Springfield Democrats are, especially when we go into the summer where every day's going to be over 80
Nobody would
degrees.
have a roof. Yeah. Right? Like, how are you going to have a roof?
Nobody would have a roof. Nobody would have a pool. No,
Yeah.
Nobody would have.
No
lifeguards.
No
right?
lifeguards.
No
I mean,
lifeguards.
obviously, your good friend Gary Rabine, like, no one would have a driveway.
We have no roads,
paving.
People. Yeah, it's 82 and balmy. We're going to go ahead and take our union mandated break pursuant to our collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, I mean, this is how ridiculous it is. I have other bills too, but honestly, that one alone just tells you how much Springfield Democrats never even think about the job creators in this state.
We won't even have food. Think about that, right? 80% of Illinois is farming. And if it's 80 degrees or higher, they're like, hey, we're not going to go and work the fields because it's too warm outside. Like, that's a problem.
You know, the real problem, Aaron, is that we would not have Core Strategies political consultants. I got to tell you, Collin, that second that thermostat says 80 degrees, I'm out, man.
No. He's got to go get a suntan for the first time in his life.
How do you not understand how well I tan, Collin?
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving along here. Let's talk about this. In Illinois, something we've seen, because I've been doing this now. You and I have been in politics for a while. We got the two youngins with us today.
We started out when we were her age.
Yeah, actually, that's not untrue. And the problem that we've seen is that, as Chris kind of tried to articulate, but badly because it's Chris, was that under Madigan, Democrats actually were a little bit more moderate. What we have seen under J.B. Pritzker is just how progressive, how far left Democrats have become in this state. I want to give you a sampling just from the last 6 months on things the Democrats have either passed or tried to pass down in Springfield. They tried to pass at the last minute assisted suicide just last week. They tried to legalize prostitution multiple times. They tried to pass a bill that would let child sex offenders live closer to schools. They made sure to provide free abortions to non-citizens and on college campuses. They tried to pass a bill that would reduce the time that violent criminals stay in prison. They tried to pass a bill that would legalize attacks on police officers, that would automatically seal criminal records. They tried to pass a bill that would force insurance companies to provide insurance to convicted felons. They tried to pass a bill that would force your kid's pediatrician to ask them if you have guns at home. They tried to pass a bill that would allow businesses to boycott Israel and still be invested in by the state. They tried to pass a bill that would outlaw private insurance. They tried to do away with your rights as a parent when it comes to homeschooling. And they want you to pay for laser hair removal for transgenders. That's just a sampling of what politicians, these far-left Democrats in Springfield, tried to do, and not even 6 months, the last 5 months. Yeah. That's how far left the Democratic Party has become in this state.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, those things probably sound so crazy that you don't even really realize, like, these are things that are happening. People, I think for some of these things, like legalizing prostitution, it sounds so outlandish. You're like, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. But the assisted suicide bill actually passed through the House. We had enough votes in the House to pass a assisted suicide bill. So think about that. I mean, it didn't go through the Senate, but one chamber, it passed. That's not far away from becoming law. So I think for us, at least, both Republican caucuses, our strategy this year has been to bring awareness to the fact that this is going on, because a lot of people don't really realize this, like what happens in Springfield. So we've been really trying to bring attention to just how crazy these progressive policies are. Some of them sound outlandish, but they're not necessarily that far away from becoming law.
Yeah, and who's voting for these bills?
Chris.
Well, who else is voting for these bills? Nabila Saeed, your state representative in this township. Michelle Mussman, who we've got a potential opponent for her, who's in the room, which is pretty exciting. Who else is voting for this? Mary Beth Canty, just east of us. These are the Democrats that you can get rid of in this next election. They're the ones voting for pretty much all of this craziness.
You know, on assisted suicide specifically, I was very surprised to read that roll call at some of the Democrats who actually voted for that. Like, I saw Anthony DeLuca voted for it. Anthony DeLuca was a Republican 20 years ago, and he's voting for assisted suicide now. I want to know what Welch has on Anthony DeLuca, where he's voting for assisted suicide. Rick Ryan, also a guy who was pro-life 20 years ago, now he's voting for assisted.
Claims to be a moderate.
Yeah, claims to be a moderate. Now he's voting for assisted suicide. Like, listen, I believe in the need for moderate Democrats. That's something that these other people on stage probably don't believe in, but I believe in the need for that. But the Republican Party needs to actually force these people's hands. If you're a moderate Democrat, you claim to be a moderate Democrat who represents your constituency, you can't go out there and vote for the big insurance kill grandma bill. Like, that's a step too far. The Republican Party, even if these guys are good guys and you like working with them down in Springfield, the Republican Party needs to actually hold some people's feet to the fire, moderate Democrats, to actually say, you claim to be a moderate, this is what you're voting for. And their constituents need to know about that.
Yeah, well, they claim, Fred Crespo, he learned what it's like to try to be moderate when it comes to fiscal policy. They kicked him out of the caucus.
And then he voted for the budget for some reason.
Yeah. Like, here's what I'm going to tell you on this. You know, on all the things that you rattled off, Collin, some of them are just incredibly far left, obnoxious would be the word I use. On the assisted suicide thing, and I don't necessarily know if you want to divert into a political policy discussion, even though I'm a conservative Republican, I think there is some value to having that discussion on that issue. And I think that the reason why is that I think for all of us, we are people that, that appreciate life, especially for the unborn. I think those are issues that are important to a lot of us. A lot of us are pro-life. But regarding specifically assisted suicide, I have to be on the opposite side of that aisle on that one. And that's probably because I have a personal friend of mine that was in a very bad position and didn't have the opportunity to have, assisted suicide, and unfortunately took their own life in a way that probably they didn't want to do it. When we talk about policy, we talk about Republicans and Democrats. I think we need to be looking at policy decisions from a real-life perspective, and what alternatives there are for other people. And when people are in certain dire situations, we can't gloss over what they're feeling, the pain that's associated with certain types of cancer, the things that are happening. If we're going to be people that believe in self-freedom, we should be having discussions on letting people choose the way that they come out of this world and give them that opportunity, because I think just to say that it's a life issue is a misrepresentation of it.
And you can see already the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. A Republican says, okay, here's a policy, let's have a conversation, let's have reasonable leadership. What you heard me read off was the Democratic approach, which is let's make this a Christmas tree for every far left progressive idea we've ever had in our lives. That's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. A Republican says, let's have a conversation. We know we represent a purple state. Let's discuss this, and maybe we can reasonably disagree. Democrats say, get in line with all of our crazy far left socialist ideas, and if not, we're going to kick you out of our party.
Absolutely, and we've seen that. We saw that with Representative Flowers. She refused to get in line, and they primaried her out of her seat. So that's kind of what happened.
That's what they're going to do to Fred Crespo.
Mark Kalish was a Democrat who dared to be just a little bit pro-life. Yep. They kicked him out. Yep.
Yeah, it's a clear message, get in line or else. Yep. And so that's how they have these people that are supposed to be moderate or voting with them, because it's, if you don't vote with me, I'm going to primary you.
But Fred Crespo, is he still outdoors? Because he voted for the budget. Like, I don't understand what this guy, I mean, listen, God bless Fred Crespo for actually taking a stand and against the speaker and all that stuff. That's great. But you can't take a stand and get kicked out of the caucus and then also vote for the budget that you disagree with so much that you got kicked out of the caucus. I mean, what's going on here, folks? Well, doesn't anybody have a spine anymore?
You did have a couple of Democrats that came over and joined every single Republican in Illinois in both legislatures that voted against this budget. And to your point, there is a lot of truth in this, but we're still in Illinois and there's still politics. I think that if we started having more discussions, and I think if Republicans were able to be a part of that conversation, which they're not right now, I think they could offer a perspective. And I think there's some of these policies, like assisted living, I think there are assisted suicide. I think some of those policies, if you had good legislation, right, very precise, not overly broad, I think you might be able to get some Republican votes. But right now there's so much angst, and get it, if you're a Republican in Illinois and you're in the House, you're upset because your voice isn't being heard. They talk about all this time, hey, we want to have diversity, we want to have everyone's voice, we want to hear from everybody, except if you're a Republican.
Yep.
Right? And except if you have a different view than us. That's not inclusivity on any part.
Well, we see this all the time. I mean, the Illinois State Rifle Association, their lobbyist, has been on our podcast a number of times, and he talks about how many times he's tried to come to the table with Democrats and said, listen, the number one group that wants to make sure that guns don't get in the hands of those who wish to use them to do harm are law-abiding gun owners. So let's sit at the table and come up with some plans here to keep guns out of those people's hands, but don't rip away the rights of law-abiding gun owners. And he's told every time, we're not interested, we just want to take away the guns. And so to your point, until we can get Republicans down there who say, let's have a reasonable conversation, good governance, it just isn't going to happen. Let's go to our next topic here. Aaron already talked about it a little bit. We got to hit on this hard. It's clear J.B. Pritzker doesn't give a crap about Illinois. Let's just be real here. He's running for president. He's got national ambitions. But while he's doing that, the state of Illinois is falling apart. Every week, it seems, on our podcast, we're covering a story about another problem at DCFS where a child has died. In fact, hundreds of children under J.B. Pritzker's watch, under DCFS's watch, have died. Thousands have been injured under J.B. Pritzker's watch, and he's doing nothing about it. We hear about problems. There's a lawsuit going on right now.
Why don't we ever hear funding about that? Why don't we, they talk about we're going to fund this, or we're going to fund this policy so we can make sure that people can hair removal if you're transgender or whatever. How about somebody saying, hey, if we have money to be doing those types of fringe things, how about we invest in our own policies and our own groups that we already have in departments of children and family services? And our goal this year is to make sure that no child is killed or murdered. How about that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's true. But as I like to call him, Governor Gaslight keeps telling us everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't look behind the curtain. Right now, the state is trying to cover up during a lawsuit that there was sexual abuse of minors in the state's juvenile detention centers, and the state has been Kwame Raoul has been actively trying to cover it up. You've got Pritzker's Department of Corrections is being sued because they were abusing people with mental illness. You've got abuse and neglect at the state's developmentally disabled centers in state-run facilities. Pritzker's own head of tourism was caught in a massive conflict of interest. We see every week there's stories of Pritzker employees being caught in PPP fraud, unemployment fraud. Pritzker's head ID&R is being audited because of a significant financial mismanagement. Even the Illinois Tollway is being held accountable for wasting $45 million because of a mistake. I mean, we're seeing over and over, under Pritzker, his administration, his departments, his divisions, his whatever you want to call them, they are not being led by a governor who cares because he's not even here.
It's because Pritzker came into this when he ran in 2018. He came from the donor class. Everybody liked him because he would just stroke checks, stroke checks, stroke checks. Then he became governor because he bought his way into the governor's mansion, and he never had a background in governing. He never had a background. He didn't have the relationships you need in each of these department heads. Then he looked at his administration and said, hey, how do I get to the next step? How do I be able to run for president in 4 or 8 years? And he started putting far left people into these spots, patronage jobs in each of these spots to help bolster his support for when he wants to take the next step. Instead of putting the most qualified people that are professional, that are experts in each of these divisions and each of these departments. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing patronage jobs, and you're seeing corruption on these levels because the 2,200 people that he appointed don't know what they're doing. Because they're not there to do that job. They're there to elevate him when he wants to run, or they're to try these other policies to see if this is going to bode well in polling or wherever else. That's why there's not concentration on a quality education. That's not why there's concentration on the transit system that affects people getting to work and kids getting to school and people getting around the state. That's why there's not discussions on how we're going to make DCFS better. That's not how reason they're not concentrating on how we can make insurance more affordable for everybody by a new department head and the Illinois Department of Insurance. Those are real, true policy issues that will affect everybody on a daily basis and help everyone. But they're not fancy and they're not exciting, so they never get any headlines. When you start talking about we're going to make sure that every transgender boy gets to be able to compete in girls' sports, it gets headlines. And that's what they want to target, because that's what gets them, voices and getting heard and name ID in all these other states. But doing a good job here in Illinois where it matters is where the concentration should be.
Yeah, you've got almost 13 million people in this state. And if I had a chance, I've never met the governor. If I had a chance, I would just straight up ask him, you want to be president, don't the 13 million people in this state matter? You were elected. You were elected. That is a big deal. I know I'm old school when it comes to politics, but to me, when you are honored with a vote from a citizen, that is a big deal. And so you were elected to lead the 12.7 million or whatever it is people in this state. Why aren't you doing that job? Because people are hurting. The things that I listed, who's getting hurt? Let's be real. It isn't most of us in this room, at least under this category. It's your developmentally disabled. It's your special needs. It's your kids, especially in minority communities, low-income communities. That's who's being hurt. And yet J.B. Pritzker in his TV ads and his press conferences, we're standing for the minorities. We're standing for the low income. We're standing for the neediest and most vulnerable.
He's standing on top of them.
Basically, yeah. Which, at the end of the day, the problem is that under J.B. Pritzker's leadership, the people in the state who need help the most are not getting it. And it's time for him to get the hell out of the way. You want to run for president? Fine, get out. I did this a couple months ago. I've never done this before, but I called on him to simply resign. Not don't run again. Literally resign, because it's clear you don't care about the citizens in this state. I know Stratton is a far left liberal and this would help her campaign for U.S. Senate. I don't care. At least we'd have a governor who actually wanted to be governor, even if it was only for 5 minutes, because Pritzker right now doesn't have an interest in us.
I have stated on the record many times that I hated Bruce Rauner. I don't think he was a good governor, all that stuff. But one thing about Bruce Rauner is that he was still the governor. He tried to govern the state. I think he did a poor job of it, but he tried to govern this state in what he thought was the best way. We don't have a governor right now. We have a candidate who happens to also be governor. Yeah. And the last time something like this happened was with Blagojevich. But I think even Blagojevich did a better job at least trying to appear to be governor. I don't think Pritzker is doing it, even from a marketing perspective, from a comms perspective. I don't think there's any doubt that he's not even trying to be the governor right now. He's just trying to be a candidate.
Absolutely. And I also want to say every single department failure that we see with DCFS, DHS, that falls at the feet of Governor Pritzker. That is his administration. Counts all those agencies. That's his administration. So every single failure should be at his feet. that's his fault. And especially when it's continued over and over and over again and we're not seeing change. I mean, the stories of abuse coming out of these developmental facilities is just disgusting. And I've, worked with some of my representatives on this issue. It is just sickening. The abuse.
It's so gross you literally couldn't read it at a government meeting.
Yeah, it's so disgusting that it would make everybody in this room sick. That it happens over and over again, and we don't see change because there's nobody in the governor's mansion to actually make that change.
Yeah. But
do it. Go ahead. She deserves it.
But one thing we should also look at, and there's been a lot of gloom and doom over the last 45 minutes that we've been talking, but that also gives us a really big opportunity in the next cycle. Because although those department heads can be tossed out on day one, everything that we're talking about in this state, the 2,200 jobs that are appointed by the governor, the policy decisions, somebody that is going to be here in Illinois to govern Illinois and to try to turn this ship around, however hard that might be, is something that people in this room, people watching this podcast, can do something about it in 2026, and that is by throwing J.B. Pritzker out and electing a Republican governor.
Well, so since Aaron's our local host, we'll let him be the moderator there, and literally, I'm looking at our producer. That'll be the official transition to our next topic because it's a great transition. It's exactly what we want to talk about next. For those who are here or watching, Gabriella has a hard stop time in a couple minutes, so we're going to take questions from the audience after this topic. I'm going to let her go first on this topic because she's going to need to leave, but we need to talk about it. You can't change policy if you don't win elections. And right now, we've got to talk about it. After all these problems we just told you about, guess what? In April, conservatives got shellacked. Not so much here in Palatine Township, but overall throughout the state, got shellacked. Last November, Republicans underperformed and lost a bunch of races we should have won. And so despite everything we've been talking about here for a good amount of time, Republicans are still losing. And so let's talk about that if you want to change this, we have got to go win elections.
Absolutely. And maybe I'm, young and naive, but I have a lot of hope for the state, for Cook County, for all the collar counties. I think a lot of people just don't understand what's happening. They're voting Democrat because maybe they feel like they're more socially liberal, but they're not really paying attention to just how insane and progressive things are in Springfield. So I think it's just about working hard, getting out on doors, and speaking with these people one-on-one. And explaining the difference between, this isn't even about national politics. This is about state politics. This is about local politics. It's about putting reasonable people in office, people that believe in good governance, people that believe in just reasonable policies. It doesn't have to be crazy either way, especially in this area. I think we can see a lot of progress with getting out there and speaking with voters. I think it's very winnable. People just have to be willing to do the work, and we have to find candidates that are willing to get out there and knock every door twice in their district. And thank you.
As somebody a company that runs campaigns, I want my candidates to knock on the doors twice by Labor Day this year, let alone by next election. But
and all the precinct captains and precinct committeemen, they should already be out there knocking on doors. But
yeah, and here's the thing. I want to share with you all something that was heartening to me because I had a moment. We all do. We have those moments of doubt. After I think it was the 22 elections, I had a moment where I was like, why am I doing this? So my company's been blessed. We do politics nationwide now, and this is my home state. But at a certain point, you're like, forget it. I'm done. And I hit that moment after the 22 elections. So I commissioned a pretty expensive research to identify, is there hope in Illinois? And there was one thing that came out of that was especially enlightening to me, that kept me around, that has me still fighting. We asked the voters in Illinois, how do you identify yourself? Are you conservative? Are you moderate? Are you liberal? In a blue state like Illinois, we're conditioned to think that the number one answer would be liberal, right? I mean, it's a blue state. The number one answer by far was moderate. As a matter of fact, liberal wasn't even in second. It was third behind conservative. The voters in this state are not far left, California, New York, Connecticut type voters, Massachusetts type voters. They are working class, moderate individuals who you can win their support. You go knock on the door of a California transplant down in Naperville, they ain't changing their vote. They're voting Democrat. But you go knock on the door of a hard-working Illinoisan, you can win their support. They're not far left. They're more in the middle. There is hope, but as you just said, we got to have the conversations and let them know what's going on because the media ain't doing it. And so we've got to do it.
I think one of the problems that the Republican Party finds itself is that I have conversations with Democrats because, I know a lot of Democrats. You know me. They're paying my salary basically to say the things I say on this podcast. That was a joke, by the way. But in any case,
after they put Madigan in jail, they're going to come after Chris next.
That's right. You see me walking, doing the perp walk. But in any case, I talked to them and I said, listen, there's these problems in the state of Illinois. You look at the stuff at DCFS. You look at the problems with the transit. We can't get this accomplished. You got that accomplished. And you know what Democrats will usually tell me? It's like, yeah, all that stuff's terrible. This state sucks. But look at the Republicans. They nominated Darren Bailey. You thought he was going to fix all of it? I think the Republican Party needs to, has the branding problem to where if we could find a way to articulate the problems of this state and build a message around it and identify a candidate or candidates across every district in this state who are appealing to the average voter, you could win elections in this state. But you have to build the narrative and you have to find good candidates. Until you do that, you're going to continuously have these people in the state who only 21% of them think it's affordable to live here, but they're going to keep voting Democrat because they look at the Republican Party and say, they got nothing for me. They're not doing anything for me.
You know, it pains me so much to actually agree with you on this issue. But I think you hit it really on the head. And the reason is that just kind of like what you said, it comes down to a lot of it to the candidate themselves. If we as the Republican Party can look past all these purity tests that everyone has, you're not Trump enough, you're not conservative enough, you're a rhino, you're this, you're that, get rid of the noise for a second and concentrate on true policy. If we can find candidates that are exciting, that are energetic, that can give people hope, that can say, hey, this is the message that we're going to bring around Illinois, and they can deliver that message in a coherent way that is palatable for people to receive. We've already tried the rich people thing. We tried it with Bruce Rauner. We tried it with J.B. Pritzker. I think that we need to return to having candidates that are regular people that have a sense to serve, that have a message and a personal story that resonates with people on how they can change Illinois, show them a path of how Illinois could have some Republicans in office. Are we going to turn it red immediately? No. But I think there's enough human resources and strong candidates in Illinois that we can start turning that tide in the other direction. And I think that begins in 2026. And I think everybody in this room, everyone watching at home, will have a good candidate if we can find a way to find those candidates and get them the power and the confidence to be able to run.
And I want to keep talking. I want to keep talking about this, but I know obviously you're on a clock. So let me give you a final word here on this topic if you'd like.
Absolutely.
Before you go.
Yeah, just two more quick things I want to say before I head out. First and foremost, I think that Illinois Republicans, we sort of have an issue with a self-fulfilling prophecy. We say, there's no point in voting. My vote doesn't mean anything. There's no Republicans. We're not going to win. And then we're saying that to our neighbors and our friends. And now they're like, there's no point. I'm not going to vote. We say it over and over. There's no point. I'm not going to vote. So we keep telling people, everything's so bad. Like, there's no way we're going to win. And then it happens. We make it happen because we're convincing people that their vote doesn't mean anything. But we had state representatives winning by 30, 40 votes last cycle. That is a huge deal. That's a lot of seats that we can gain if we start getting people out to the polls. And the second point that I also want to say, looking towards the future, the conservative kind of slant for Gen Z, for my generation, is huge. There's a huge increase in conservative Gen Z voters. So I believe that there's a lot of hope for the future. I'm vice chair of a new North Cook Young Republican chapter along with my chairman, Eric Angerer. But we're the third or fourth new YR chapter this year alone in the state of Illinois. So there's huge momentum with younger people getting them out to the polls. For so long, people have always said that the young generation is liberal. That's not true. The young generation is ready and hungry for change, ready for reasonable, good governance. We just have to make sure that we're out there getting them to the polls. So I believe that there's a lot of hope. We just have to keep the hope up. We have to get people out voting. And that's it for me. That's the end. But I just wanted to end on a good, hopeful note. So
we're going to take some questions from the audience. So the episode will continue, but we'll say goodbye to Gabriella. We'll kind of finish up on just this topic of how do we start to win in Illinois. And I think the big thing is, as you said, it's getting the right candidates in place. We have struggled with that in Illinois, is getting solid candidates who can win in this state. They got to be able to raise money. They got to be able to appeal to the voters. We're not going to win in Illinois if we can't put someone in front of the voters who they're actually going to support. I want to give you an example. Just up here in the northwest suburbs, yes, they're voting Democrat, whether it's for federal races or even some state races, but in some of these races that we look at, there's a 35% gap between how they vote when it comes to, let's say, Donald Trump for president versus how they voted on the progressive tax that Chris brought up earlier. A 35% gap between how they voted to reject the progressive tax, but then didn't support, let's say, Trump for president or maybe one of our other Republican candidates. That tells you where the voters are in this region. Yes, they might not like certain personalities, and we got to work through that, but the reality is they are still fiscally responsible. We can win those voters. They're not far left California voters. We can win these voters, but we got to have the right candidates, the right message, and then we got to go out and work our butts off. All right, let's. You got the questions for me? You want to get into me? Oh, yeah. See, that's when I'm talking, I'm not
Saturday
thinking.
morning, everyone.
All right. So let's look through some of these and cover some of these. Let me see what's going to be juicy here. Stand by. I want to find a really good one to start with. Let's talk about gerrymandering. So the maps are currently gerrymandered. We got a question here about if Republicans retake the General Assembly, how likely is it that we can un-gerrymander the maps?
Well, that's a great question. So the first part of it is it's a two-part question, two-part answer. Pardon me. The first part is yes, you have to get out of the super minority. We need to be able to be veto-proof in either the Senate or the House. And we have to win the governor's mansion. That's it. You got to take 2 out of the 3. And you don't have to take the majority. You take the governor's mansion, and then you take 4 or 5 state rep seats to flip. And now we're talking. Now we're in the fight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is, I'm a political animal. I'm going to tell you the truth, even when it's inconvenient. And the inconvenient truth is, the state's not going to be red in 2030, 2032. It's just not possible based on these maps. So as Aaron said, we've got to get out of the super minority, and then it's about a coin flip. It's literally about a coin flip. It's about if we're out of the super minority in the legislature, and we've got the governor's mansion, what will end up happening is vetoes and passes here, passes there, and it ends up, since no one can agree, that there's literally a coin flip on who gets to draw the maps. So will we ever have ungerrymandered maps? No. Either the Dems are going to gerrymander these maps or the Republicans are going to gerrymander these maps. But we saw in the 90s, right? When Republicans got a chance to actually draw the maps, Republicans did well and actually won elections in this state. Will we give up that power? Listen, from a good governance perspective, yes, we need to have just fair maps across the board. We absolutely need that. But the reality is if the Republicans win the opportunity to draw the maps for a decade, there's no way in hell they're giving that up. It's either we're drawing the maps or the Democrats are, but that doesn't happen if we don't win. I think it's 5 to 7 more seats in each the House and the Senate and the governor's mansion. And we got to get that done by 2030. The clock is ticking.
One thing people forget, I'm sorry, is that in 1996, right, most of the people in this room were on this planet in 1996, right? Chris, you might have been in diapers, but
I would know. I'm not even born yet.
Not even born yet. But in 1996, I was graduating from Palatine High School, but that was not the exciting part. The exciting part...
I mean, it was exciting to his parents that he actually graduated.
They were shocked there. But the exciting part was Lee Daniels was the Speaker of the House. That was the time that Mike Madigan lost the House of Representatives during the 40 years of his political reign, that we had a Republican-controlled House of Representatives. We have every statewide elected officials, and we had a really good seats in the Senate. That is during my lifetime that we were able to do that. So it isn't that far off. But when we lost control of gerrymandering the maps, we lost control of a lot of the different things that were happening across the state. If let the Democrats had never let go back. And so we have a great opportunity, I think, in 26 and again in 30 to try to shift that back to our side.
This next question is really fun because I have a feeling these two are going to disagree, and that's kind of fun. So the question is, does the Illinois Republican Party have a game plan to turn Illinois red? I have a feeling Aaron might be a little more optimistic on this one, so we'll let you go first.
Well, no, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and defer to my friend over here, Chris, and then I'll be able to retort his answer.
So to be the Jesuit, because I went to Loyola, what do you mean by the Illinois Republican Party? Do you mean the actual establishment official Illinois Republican Party? Do they have a game plan, or are we encompassing the people in this room? Are we encompassing the caucuses? What do you mean by that question, Collin?
I didn't write the question, so just answer however you want, man.
Probably not. There isn't a game plan. It's not as though everybody's sitting in a room. It's not as though all your state central committeemen and all your township chairs and all your caucus leaders are all sitting down in a room. They're all going to hash out a plan written by some high-priced consultant. I wonder who that could be.
They're not calling me, man. They're not calling me.
No, they're not.
I'm cheaper than he is also, so I don't know. But it's not like that. There is no plan. Now, there are plans amongst the individual caucuses. and there's a plan that exists within the minds of intellectuals such as myself and Collin over here, and the lights just turned off for some reason there, and you might want to get that checked out. Not pay the electric bill. You want to talk about fiscal responsibility. I don't know about that, fellas. But, no, I don't think there's a cohesive plan in place right now. I think the plan, as I've stated before, is that the Republican Party needs to identify specific races, be they statewide or in districts, that they're just going to focus on, heavily focus its resources on, and it needs to start building a narrative that there's problems with this state that are caused by the Democrats, and the Republican Party has the ideas to fix them for working families. That's what the plan should be. I don't think that there is a cohesive plan on paper right now for the party.
That is honestly the most optimistic I've heard, Chris. On that. I expected way more doom and gloom from Chris on that one.
So I was expecting fire. But here's what I'll tell you.
You're going to need that if your lights go out. It's fire,
right.
Yeah.
I am a member of the State Central Committee, which, for those of you who don't know what it is, that is the directing board of the Illinois Republican Party. And it is disheartening to share with you that there is not a very specific plan, a map that we're going off of. There is a lot of personalities, and there's a lot of diversity on locations where people are. You have some of the Southern Illinois people are like, what are you talking about? It's totally Republican. I'm like, come up to Cook County. We're fighting for every postage stamp of space out here. It is not totally Republican. I'm like, you guys are living in Disneyland, and I'm living in Chi Gaza. But there are individuals that are high-functioning, high performers that are working together, maybe even around the party apparatus, to do exactly what you said, to look at specific campaigns, to look at specific races that we can be effective and that we can win. And I think a lot of those are going to be on the statewide level. I think, obviously, the governor's race is one that is being widely talked about. I think the United States Senate seat, that is now an open seat because Dick Durbin resigned, is one that we're talking about. I think that you have 5 or 6 seats in the House of Representatives that Minority Leader Tony McCombie is targeting. I think that you have John Curran, our Minority Leader in the Senate, targeting 2 to 3 races. I think that all of those different groups are working and are going to be meeting very, very soon to say, hey, where can we be effective? And it's not across the state, it's too broad. But are there little pockets of Republicans? Where can we have success? And then can we layer that? Can we scale it? Can we replicate that across Illinois to get success in areas that we have a shot? And I think there are areas, because there are a lot of Republicans in Illinois. You can't hide us, nowhere. We got to go somewhere. And so if we can work with the different parts and layer those races, and like you said, top of the ticket, Darren Bailey, like him or don't like him, there were some challenges down ballot because of him at the top. If we can find a strong governor candidate, we can find a strong Senate candidate, if we can go to regular people, your next door neighbors, not people that show up to Republican meetings on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and say, hey, take a look at who we got running at the top of the ticket over here. Look at our slate. Look at these candidates that we have. You might be surprised. These people got, they got some grit. They got some traction. That is how we start changing it, because we bring out people that can lead the party through the candidate system, and then we can push behind them, and that lifts all the ships for all the Cook County races, state rep races, state senate races, if we can give people a reason to invest in us and show them a path to victory.
And I was hoping for fireworks because it's great for clicks, and that was really nice and friendly. I don't know what's going on here. I mean, here's the thing. When you ask, is there a plan, I can say confidently there are many, many, many plans, and that's part of the problem, is that I can tell you, I could probably list 15 different groups or individuals who have a plan to fix Illinois, if not more. And this has been the problem since I started in politics. You see somebody who shows a little bit of skill, a little bit of talent, and then suddenly it's, people are clicking, or I get a radio show, or whatever it might be, and then it's like, now I get to be king. I'm going to lead us out of into the promised land. And the problem is we're never going to do it under that sort of a mentality, because that's not how conservatives think. That's not how Republicans think. We're not looking for a king or an emperor. We're looking for, we want to run our own lives. We don't want someone like that. So if we're going to succeed in Illinois, it's going to be as a team. It's going to be in a situation where we say, you know what? I don't need to be the leader of this. I don't need my name on the yard sign. I'm going to help you win instead. But we don't see that often enough. Ego has gotten in the way so much in the almost 20 years that I've been involved in Republican politics in this state. And as a result, I've watched it go from purple to deep blue. And so the number one thing we need to do is realize that, listen, I may not be the one who gets credit for this, but I'm going to put in the work, and I'm going to make sure that we succeed together, because it's going to help all of us.
When you're talking about team, one thing is we don't need, and everyone argues about this with me, we don't need 100% of everybody. we're never going to get 100%. So why are we trying? Let's take 85% of those that agree with us and let's go run up the score. For far too long, we've had so many people trying to capitulate to the other 15% that even if we could get them, they still won't do anything. So let's take all the naysayers. They're like, oh, it's got to be a big tent. You're right, it does have to be a big tent, but not everybody's invited. Let's go and take the people that want to perform at a high level, that can execute a plan, and that can give and deliver a message, and let's go take them and win. And let's take all the clown car people and all the other fringe sides, we know who we're talking about on social media, and let them go do their thing, and let's the rest of us go and win and lead by example.
I think Mary makes a very provocative point there. I think it is a quality over quantity issue when it comes to planning in this state. But the disheartening thing from my perspective is that I noticed that even at like the micro level, you talk about township Republican organizations, county Republican organizations, there's no plans being made even within them. Like if you asked, and I'm not going to call Aaron out on this because he's new to the job and everything. But if you asked like any county chairman in the state, other than maybe Michael Butler because he calls me every day with his plans, but other than Michael Butler, you asked him, what is your game plan for 2026? You'd get a very vague answer that lasts about 2 minutes. It doesn't really answer the question. And that's what's disheartening to me, is that I think that the planning for the Illinois Republican Party, it's not the responsibility necessarily of the state central committee to plan every individual victory across the state of Illinois. It is up to you as individual precinct committeemen and as township and county Republican organizations to put a plan together of how you are going to get Republicans elected in your jurisdictions. You cannot expect the state Republican, and Aaron knows this because he's probably got people coming to him every day after every election saying, Aaron, why didn't you do this for me? Why didn't you do that for me? But it starts with you. It doesn't start just from the top. It starts from the candidates and the local organizations to put plans together to win elections. You cannot always rely on top-down leadership, especially if you're the Republican Party.
You hit it on the head, actually. I didn't know that you knew that. Like, after every election, exactly what you said happens. And I feel like I got 150 ex-wives after every election calling and asking me, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? What happened over here, right? But the plan is those same 150 people that are always chirping in my ear, where were you? I didn't see you putting out lawn signs. I didn't see you knock on one door. And I certainly didn't see you donate 50 cents. You want to chirp and you want to be a keyboard hero sitting at home and complain about the situation. How about this? I'll be the coach. Get a helmet, get in the game, join the party, and let's do something about it.
Yeah, that's... So we weren't able to get to everybody's question. If we missed yours, I apologize. We're out of time, but we'll still hang around at the end to chat. But to close down the episode, we always let our guests, our panelists, give their final words. So Chris, your final thoughts for this episode.
Well, thank you all for coming out here on a sunny Saturday morning, or at least a foggy Saturday morning. The Manitoba wildfires are still ongoing. My lungs have never been worse. So thank you all for coming out here. Please enjoy the coffee. Please enjoy the donuts. And just remember the things that we talked about here. If you want to be involved in the Republican Party, if you want the Republican Party to be successful, you cannot rely on Kathy Salvi to tell you, oh, this is the game plan, here's $1 million, go win your race. No. It is up to the candidates, it is up to the organizations to put into work and to get people elected. Well, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. If this is next week and you're watching this on TV, not TV, God, we don't have the budget for that. Not yet, not until the Democratic checks cash. But if you're watching this next week on Spotify or YouTube, you have a wonderful rest of your week, and keep up the good work, everyone. Thank you.
You got applause, Chris. All right, our local host, Aaron, thank you for having us out. Your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. First and foremost, I want to thank the most important person in the room. Thank you, Chris, for getting up early and coming out. No. Thank you to everyone that's watching out here today on the podcast and everyone that's in the room. It's a Saturday morning or wherever time it is that you're watching this. You could be doing anything else. You could be watching reruns of Yellowstone or Game of Thrones or whatever, but you're taking time out of your day to be involved and educate yourself on what's happening in Illinois politics on probably the best podcast that's telling you on a granular level what is happening across the state.
So, I love the probably qualifier.
The thing that I will tell you is this. Petition season starts August 4th. right? That's the first day that people can start going out there and start getting on the ballot. You have so many people that are calling themselves a candidate. I'm the candidate for this. I'm the candidate for this. I'm running for this. I'm running for that. Nobody's a candidate yet. Not until they're on the ballot, at the end of November after the petitions and challenges are out there. So forget about that noise. Forget about all the keyboard warriors. I think there's going to be a lot of great candidates that you're going to see coming out in the next 2 months, because now we're starting to get to the part where the rubber's hitting the road. You're going to see more candidates for statewide office. You're going to see your state rep candidates, state senate, county commissioners, county-wides. All of those are coming out of the woodwork. I would ask you all to keep your powder dry, because the great candidate may not have announced yet. We're going to know when they're at come August 4th, because they're going to be out there getting petitions. So my suggestion is, everyone keep your powder dry, see who all the candidates are before you make a decision on who you're going to go and who you're going to endorse, and then let's go out there and work out really strong to make sure those candidates make the ballot, and that we have the best Republican representatives and candidates on the ballot for us to give us the best opportunity for success come next November.
Give him a round of applause. There we go. And I'll close with this. Aaron's right that obviously petition season is coming, and it's coming in just under 2 months. Goodness gracious. But the reality is, you want to know what Democrats are doing right now? They're registering voters. See, for them, the election season never stopped. I see this all the time with Republicans, and it's not just in this state. I travel around the country training Republicans, and it's like we sort of like, okay, good, this is our off season. There is no off season in politics. Democrats right now are adding to their vote totals. They're adding more registered voters so that the next election that comes around, they can beat us by even more. So there is no off season. We need to be out there, especially in Palatine, in this area. There's all sorts of community festivals. There's events. We've got to be out there. I know your Republican organization is going to have a booth. They're going to be walking in parades. You've got to be there with them, because right now we're raising our awareness for the party. We're getting people to understand that we've got a better path forward, and we need to be registering new voters who agree with us on the policies. It is not the off season. We are in the heat of election season. So please, whether you're watching around the state or you're here in the room, please understand that you don't have 2 more months to rest. Get out there now. With that, we're going to close down the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Lane Davis. Thank you to everybody in the room. You guys have been awesome. We will catch you next time on the Smoke-Filled Room, and hopefully on that one, I actually get to smoke a cigar. Catch you guys soon.